I'm wondering how long it took for her to develop loving feelings for her husband. Or isn't that a relevant question? Well, it is. I want to know.
Has anybody heard me talk about developing loving feelings towards her husband? No? What were we saying?
You said there was a shift in her perception.
A shift in her perception. Yes? Any other comment?
You redirected her thinking.
Redirect? In what way?
Not blaming, accepting.
Right.
Understanding.
Yes. Now, what is the meaning of the tendency to think in terms of feelings? We find it very often that students of psychotherapy have a tendency to think in terms of feelings, changing your feelings, or redirecting, did you say, your feelings. It indicates a general mistaken idea that feelings determine our mode of being in the world. That feelings are primary. And in order to be healthy, somehow you have to find a way of changing your feelings. And if you're going to feel right, bless you,
Thank you.
you will be healthy. There are two basic erroneous assumptions which are rampant in psychotherapy. One is that by changing your behavior, you can be healthy. And the other is by changing your feelings, you can be healthy. First of all, it is impossible to change your feelings. You can only kid yourself that you feel differently than you felt before. And changing your behavior has nothing to do with being healthy. It is just a strategy. You can assume various strategies, but that has nothing to do with healing. You see, behavior is an epiphenomenon of our ways of thinking and seeing. And so are our feelings. In other words, behavior and feelings are byproducts of thought processes. What determines our thought processing?
Would that be our mode of being?
No, our mode of being is determined by our thought processes.
Oh.
Nobody knows? Perceptions, right. Our thought processes are determined by how we see things. What determines our perceptions?
No values.
Our values. What else?
Attitude.
Our attitudes. What else?
Thinking
Beg your pardon?
our needs.
Needs.
We think it.
That which we think preconceptions, right?
Our experience.
Experiences are interpretations of our thought processes and perceptions. It's a more complex thing. But anyway, seeing right is crucial. Now, ordinarily, we think that we see reality. Everybody is sure that he can see what is going on in the world or around him. Unfortunately, that is not true. Most of the time, we don't see what is going on. We only see our thoughts about what is going on. Or somebody else's thoughts. For instance, if you are a Freudian psychotherapist or an Adlerian psychotherapist or a Jungian psychotherapist, you will have a tendency to see in people or in your clients what Jung would see, or what Freud would see, or what Adler would see. Etc. And you don't have to be a psychotherapist to be blind. It is a normal human condition. Even other people have a tendency to see what they think somebody else might see. This is a very discouraging realization, that we think we can see what's going on, but actually we don't. We interpret what we see constantly in terms of what we are used to seeing or what we are supposed to see or what we think that we see. The Bible says, as man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And as thou seest, so thou beest. And Buddha said, and I mentioned it before, we are what we think, having become what we have thought. Therefore, the basic problem is learning how to see what really is. Having said that, it is quite clear now that the aim of our psychotherapeutic work cannot be changing people's feelings or changing their behavior. That doesn't make sense. What is needed is to help people to see better. Now, by now you may have surprised those that are ahead of me a little, that we see with our thoughts. Did you guess that? We see with our thoughts. Therefore, it is very important to be tuned in on a source of thoughts which is valid. In order for that lady to be healed of her anosmia, you know what anosmia is?
You'll smell.
Right, inability to smell. To be healed of her anosmia, she had to be helped to see her husband in a truer light than hitherto. We weren't trying to change her feelings, either did we try to change her behavior towards her husband. We were working to help her to see her husband in a more valid context, so that her thoughts about her husband might be healed. In order for her to be healed of her anosmia, her thoughts about her husband had to be healed. Now, where do our thoughts come from? From our mind? Could you explain that?
From something that, a process that we have of trying to put together things and make what we call sense out of all things that we do.
Yeah. What do we call making sense? What makes sense? When we say that makes sense to me,
Usually it fits in with what we know.
exactly. Did you all hear that? Could you explain it louder?
Usually it fits in with what we already know.
Yes. If something fits in with our preconceived ideas, then that makes sense. But if somebody says something new, that doesn't make sense. even though it may be true. Moreover, it can be very upsetting to hear something new, because it disturbs our preconceived notion. So, in order to learn to think straight, it is necessary to become acquainted with the source of thoughts. You see, contrary to general belief and impression, man doesn't produce thoughts. Man is not a producer of thought. When we say, I am thinking, let me think now, we say, let me think now, let me figure this out, let me think about it. What do we mean?
When we try to become aware of what opens up.
It means we want to rummage in our filing cabinet. Or rummage, right? We want to sort out certain pre-existent reservoir of thoughts in order to align them in such a way that they would make sense. And if we succeed, then we relax. Oh, I figured it out, it's all right. But that doesn't mean that we have produced any new thoughts. We have just rearranged the information in such a way that we would have this experience of things making sense. Yes?
What is the relationship of sense perception, sensation of one's body to thought?
You feel what you think.
If I don't think that the fire is going to be hot and I put my hand in it, it will not hurt?
Surely not. You can get hypnotized. The hypnotist can say the fire is cold, and you can burn yourself completely and you won't feel it.
How does the child react when the child for the first time touches the stove without being told?
The child thinks through the mental climate around him. Now let us come to consider the source of all thoughts. Where do thoughts come from? There are two sources of thought. There is a source of intelligent and valid ideas, which is called the divine mind. Infinite, creative intelligence. All valid and intelligent ideas come to us from this source. What are the channels of communication whereby these thoughts reach our consciousness?
Meditation.
inspiration. Inspired wisdom is creative intelligence obtaining in receptive consciousness. Now, where do the invalid thoughts come from?
The devil.
In metapsychiatry, we have another name for this source, and we speak of the sea of mental garbage. The sea of mental garbage. Teilhard de Chardin calls it the noosphere. Teilhard de Chardin, the noosphere. That's our culture, that's our civilization, that's our educational system, our history, in which we are submerged and we are constantly bombarded by these predigested common assumptions, thoughts, which are constantly knocking on the door of our consciousness. So there are two sources. One is the infinite ocean of love intelligence, and the other is the sea of mental garbage. Those of you who are familiar with the Bible will know that in Genesis it is described that God has created a firmament and divided the waters under the firmament from the waters above the firmament. Have you ever thought of that, what that could mean? Clark? Washington? Who else is a clergyman? You are a clergyman. Have you ever thought what that could mean?
The context of the class, it would probably mean the love intelligent thoughts being separated out of the chaos.
That's right, exactly. Below the firmament is the sea of mental garbage. Above the firmament is the ocean of love intelligence. In metapsychiatry, we seek to help people to rise above the firmament and gain their wisdom and their thoughts from this infinite creative source, the ocean of love intelligence. And when our patient with the anosmia was lifted out of the sea of mental garbage, she was able to behold her husband in a new light. And her thoughts about her husband became loving and affirmative in an existentially valid way. And the result was this dramatic healing which took place at the Botanical Gardens. So that is the metapsychiatric viewpoint on man's mode of being in the world. And every problem, whether it is mental, emotional, social, somatic, or psychosomatic, can be approached in this manner. You remember the 3 R's? Did we speak about the 3 R's? I think so. Can you repeat it?
Recognition, regret, and reorganization.
That's nice. I used the reformation, but this is even nicer. Reorganization is fine, fine. Now, you see, in the first class that we had on this subject, we mentioned that originally medical thinking was in terms of somatopsychic medicine. It was believed that the body can hurt the mind. If you have a toothache, it can drive you crazy. That was the flat earth era of medical thinking. Somatopsychic. Later on, things began to change and we began to think in terms of psychosomatic medicine. Now, in the light of metapsychiatric discoveries, we have come to understand that the body cannot hurt the mind, and the mind cannot hurt the body, because mind and body are one. The body is the mind, and the mind is the body. So we are moving progressively from somatopsychic medicine through psychosomatic medicine to where? To phenomenological understanding of human experience. What do we mean by that? Phenomenological understanding of human experience.
This is an example from a course that I'm taking. They say that you can program computers to do the thinking process that people do in an extremely sophisticated way. But you reach a point where there's something missing, and they use the example of a chess player, a master chess player, and they say that there's a tremendous difference in what the chess player says he does and what he actually does, because he could sit forever and tell you what he does, but he can never tell you what he experienced when he played the game. And they were talking about the situation, and I said, well, that's the phenomenology for that name, and it's still got on just years of science, and he draws on just a wide range of things that are going on that no one could ever explain to him.
Well, I wouldn't call that phenomenology. I would call that inspired creative intelligence, reaching his receptive consciousness. You see, a computer will never be able to receive inspiration. Just like a computer will never be able to compose a symphony, even though they are trying to do this with computers. Because
They
the
only do what you can told them to do.
right, exactly. The dimension of spirit is lacking there. So man is, inspired man is different from a computer. Unfortunately, there are too many computer people in the world. Inspired man is different from a computer. Unfortunately, there are too many computer people in the world who have not yet awakened to receptivity of inspired wisdom. The uncreative man has never stuck his head through the firmament. He lives just below the firmament all the time. Now, in metapsychiatry, we seek to rise above the firmament to the level of spontaneous, creative intelligence. What does spontaneous mean?
We don't originate it. They originate outside us,
Right,
above us.
right. Sponte tua. What does that mean? Sponte tua. Out of thy will. It is the will of God which reaches human consciousness in the form of creative intelligence and enables him to see what really is. And as thou seest, so thou beest. Yes.
If mind and body are one, I had this discussion with a friend of mine, and I was trying to explain this way of looking at illness,
Yes.
to ascertain the meaning of that
Yes.
thought.
Right.
And he asked me, well, what determines when a thought takes a mental form in the form of neurosis and manifests itself in a neurosis, and what determines when it becomes a physical, when it becomes transformed into a physical thing?
Yes.
And I wasn't sure how to answer that.
Yes. It usually determined by what is fashionable. Haven't you noticed that in certain periods of history, certain types of illnesses were fashionable? There was a time when hysteria was fashionable. There was a time when obsessive-compulsive neurosis was. There was a time when the plague was fashionable. And nowadays, cancer is fashionable and the flu. And whatever is fashionable at that particular time, you see what happens is if a certain kind of problem becomes prevalent in our environment, we begin to be afraid of it. And the fear rivets our thoughts and channels it in a particular direction. And then the energy is transmuted and channeled in that particular direction. So it's strictly a matter of style.
But still, to get behind that, why might one style be prevalent rather than another, just separating the physical from the mental?
Yeah.
I mean, what?
But we
what-
don't ask why.
Oh,
Formulated. Differently.
What is the meaning of
What
it?
is the-
It manifests itself.
Yes, you have
Physical
physical
rather than
mental. Now, I just finished telling you that there is no difference. That the body is the mind and the mind is the body. And the transmutation of mental energy will move in the direction in which the maximum fear is moving. And the Bible beautifully explains this, and it says, that which I feared most has come upon me. Right? You may wind up becoming Bible scholars after this. May not know much about psychosomatic medicine. So the great mystery, you know, this question, I remember it in medical school throughout my years. In practice, various scientific research has been conducted about the question, why is it that some people develop stomach ulcers and some people develop colitis and some people develop schizophrenia? And why is it that this, and tremendous complicated theories and speculations were being written about, and it's really very simple, you see. And the better we understand things, the simpler they get.
Isn't it sometimes what a family pattern has been that may suggest itself to a person as what's kind of like fashionable?
Yes, well, certainly. What is fashionable, what is acceptable, and what is feared. I don't know whether you remember in our previous classes last year, we mentioned that children are influenced by 3 factors in parental consciousness. No matter what kind of parenting you are practicing, you can be the most sophisticated psychologist and look up his spark and everything and do everything right, and it will be of no significance. But what you cherish, what you hate, and what you fear, that will determine the condition of the child's progress. And it can be totally unconscious. But what the parents cherish, what they hate, and what they fear will have the greatest impact on a child. Therefore, healthy parenting is impossible just on the basis of good intentions or of self-sacrificing love. Parents can be loving and generous and devoted and move heaven and earth for the sake of the child. If they don't understand these 3 elements in consciousness, it will be of very little avail. What we cherish, what we hate, and what we fear.
Can you explain a little bit more on what cherish, why that would be a problem?
Whatever we cherish, the children will cherish. Suppose a mother cherishes smoking cigarettes or feeling good, right? We see that the children have a tendency to become interested in those ways of being in the world which are cherished, maybe secretly or unconsciously. Suppose a mother would never smoke in the house in front of her children, having been advised by a child psychologist not to do this. Will that solve the problem? It will not solve the problem. Because health is not a matter of behavior. It is the cherishing that needs to be healed. In order to be healthy, we must cherish that which is existentially valid. And we must be compassionate enough to be free of hate, and certainly we must seek to be fearless. How can we become fearless? Isn't the whole world scared? Is there a way to be fearless? Certainly it is very hard to be fearless, especially if we read the newspapers and watch television and talk to our friends. But it is possible to be fearless to a large extent. Can anyone tell us how to become fearless?
By thinking about the lilies of the field and the birds of the air.
By thinking about the lilies in the field and the birds in the air. How will that make us fearless?
They neither reap nor spin nor reap, and yet Solomon in all his beauty, taken care of.
Do you think this will make us fearless?
If you believe it.
Oh, no. Oh, of course, the Bible has the answer, but it's not the right answer. What does the Bible recommend for fearlessness?
Perfect mind.
Trust in God.
Perfect kingdom.
Believe.
Believe. You had perfect love casteth out fear. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. He that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. For God is love. Now, you see, when we attain the realization of spiritual love and come to cherish it, then there will be no problem with what we cherish. There will be no problem with hate. And there will be no problem with fear. And that's the way to be healthy and to stay healthy, no matter what sicknesses are fashionable at a particular time. Thank you.